The longest time, I thought I was starting too late, not just with this channel, but with almost everything. I'd look at where people who were already years into what they were doing and quietly arrived at the same conclusion every time. They got there first. The window was already closed. But by the time I figured things out, everyone else had already built something. I'd never really questioned that thought because it didn't feel emotional. It felt like an observation, just me being honest with where I was. So whenever I hesitated to start something, I didn't think of it as fear, but I thought of it as I was simply acknowledging reality. Then I finally started this channel anyways, and almost immediately that story began falling apart. Not because I suddenly caught up, but because I realized that I've been measuring the wrong thing the entire time. Before I uploaded the first video, I spent an embarrassing amount of time looking at other creators. I tell myself I was researching, learning from people who were further ahead. Sometimes I really was, but if I'm honest, that wasn't what I was doing most of the time. Most of the time, I was keeping score. I'd see hundreds of videos, thousands of subscribers, years of consistency, and then I'd look back at my own channel. Nothing. No uploads, no audience, no proof that I could actually do any of this. Every comparison seemed to confirm the same quiet conclusion. They're already where I wanted to be. I'm just arriving too late. The strange thing is that thought never felt dramatic. It felt objective, like I was simply looking at the numbers and accepting what they meant. I wasn't telling myself I couldn't succeed. I was telling myself I was starting from too far behind. And looking back now, I think that's why the story was so convincing. It didn't sound like self-doubt, it sounded like realism. And sometimes those are the hardest stories to question. The strange thing is, once I finally started posting, I kept waiting for reality to confirm the story. I thought the gap would be obvious, that I'd constantly feel years behind everyone else, that every video would remind me how much catching up I still had to do. But none of that really happened. What surprised me wasn't the gap disappeared, but was that it stopped meaning that I always assumed it meant. Because the more I thought about it, the stranger the whole idea of being behind became. Behind who? Behind compared to what? That word only makes sense if everyone running the same race. If there's one timeline, one finish line, one order you're supposed to arrive in. But that's not how any of this actually works. No one watches YouTube in chronological order. No one cares whether your first video was uploaded in 2018 or yesterday. They discover your work whenever they happen to discover it. To someone who finds your channel a year from now, you won't feel late. You just feel new. And once I realized that, something else became obvious. The race I had been measuring myself against, that is the one that I invented, the creators who I kept comparing myself to weren't running beside me. They were simply further along on their own path. They weren't taking opportunities away from me. They weren't occupying places I could reach. I'd quietly turned inspiration into competition. Then I convinced myself that I was losing. Not because reality said I was, but because the story did. And for a long time, I let that imaginary race become a reason not to begin at all. Once I saw that, I couldn't stop thinking about something else. The story wasn't just describing my situation, but was shaping it. For a long time, I had looked at the gap between myself and other creators as if it were something I simply had to accept. something that already existed. But when I looked back honestly, I realized part of that gap hadn't been there at all. I created it, not by starting late, but by waiting longer. Every month I spent believing I was already too far behind was another month without making anything. No videos, no mistakes, no feedback, no chance to improve. The very distance I kept worrying about was quietly growing while I stood still. And the strange part is that every day I waited seemed to make the story feel more convincing. Because now I really was further behind than I've been yesterday. Not because I had missed my opportunity, because I spent another day believing I already had. That's what stories like this do. They don't just explain your reality, they quietly start creating it. They convince you that acting is pointless and then use your inaction as proof they were right all along. Looking back, I wasn't trapped because I started late, but I was trapped because I confused a prediction with a fact. And once I believed it was already true, I stopped doing the only thing that could ever have proved it wrong. So I finally started, and almost immediately, something surprised me. The gap I had spent so much thinking about didn't disappear, it just stopped feeling important. Because once I was actually making videos instead of imagining them, I realized that I've been measuring myself against something that had never really been mine to measure. Every time I looked at another creator, I imagined we were standing on the same path, that they were simply miles ahead of me. But that's not what I was looking at. I was looking at someone else's journey and quietly treating it as the standard for my own. Those aren't the same thing. They weren't occupying the place I could ever reach. They were simply further along in a story that belonged to them, and mine had only just begun. And once I saw that clearly, the comparison started to lose its grip because there was another gap that I had completely ignored. Not the distance between me and someone else 10th year, but the distance between the version of me who kept waiting and the version who finally pressed upload. That was the only gap I could actually change. Not the years I'd already missed, not the head start someone else had, but just the small difference between where I was today and where I'll be after one more video. One more lesson, one more attempt. That's the strange thing about starting. It doesn't erase the past, it just gives the future somewhere new to begin. And that's the only gap that ever really mattered. I'm not going to tell you the feeling of being behind disappears once you start, because mine didn't. Not immediately. Some days I'd post a video and still feel the pull of the old comparison. Still, catch myself looking at someone else's numbers and measuring mine against them. But something had changed underneath it, because now I had evidence the story hasn't predicted, videos that existed. Feedback was real, and a small but growing distance between the version of me who kept waiting and the version who had finally started moving. And that distance, the only one that was ever mine to close, kept growing with every attempt. Not dramatically, not fast enough to satisfy the part of me that still wanted to catch up, but steadily, in a direction that had nothing to do with where anyone else was. So if you are carrying the version of this story right now, the one that says the window has already closed, that everyone else got there first, that's the gap. That the gap is too wide no matter. I'm not going to tell you it isn't real. I'm going to ask you what you're actually measuring. Because there are two gaps. There's the one between you and someone else's journey, and the one between who you are right now and the one you'll be after you begin. Only one of those is yours, and only one of them Change is the moment you decide to start. But here's something that I noticed once I actually finally started it. The bad period, that is the early videos where nobody actually watched, the stumbling on camera, the gap between what I was making and what I wanted to make was actually gradually becoming shorter than I expected. Not because I was unusually talented, not because I got lucky, but because I had been overestimating how long it would last. And I have been using that overestimate as one more reason not to begin. Why does the bad period feel so much longer before you start than it actually is once you're already in it? Well, that's what this next video is going to be about.